Someone make it make sense.
Probably a couple.
Happy Disaster Tuesday to everybody. Those of you guys who've been watching for a little bit probably are familiar. So that happened. Today was the second Tuesday of the month. So happy to see that you guys are here. Hi, Candace. How are you guys doing today? Let's see if Nightbot has anything to say to you guys. And also, Triple R Wifey has a brand new picture. You guys check it out. It's sick. Has the Triple R classic. Here we can see. There it is. Beautiful. She's getting ready for her awesome YouTube channel. We've been talking about it. So yeah. So basically, this would have been happening hours ago, but alas, Disaster Tuesday. Yay, DSN! Woo! DSN's in the house, and DSN is going to help me understand how the computers work and how I can hopefully prevent the auto shutdown when I say no technology. So yeah, what was it? The non-consensual computer shutdown. So the video file, of course, is still uploading. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna chat about all the stuff there is to chat about as it's finishing up, and I've got some other stuff too. Oh, let me play my slide thing here. Okay, so yeah, because there's plenty to talk about. So a couple things I thought were funny today. EDB actually said something about lollygagging, and I was like, oh, that's my idea. She didn't call him lollygaggle, but she did say something about how he always lollygags, which I thought was really funny. And in her words today, she said that he's lost his will to be in this trial. When she said he's lost his will, I thought she was going to say lost his will to live, but it was to be in the trial. But here's something I wanted to talk about, because I just am constantly stunned by the fact there's only one. I mean, I guess he's got another prosecutor there with him, but she doesn't do anything. So he's the one. It's a one-man Lally show, and I find it so interesting. I've never ever seen a trial or heard of a trial where there's only one prosecutor ever. And I was thinking about, when you think about justice, right? Think about, if you compare it to Murdoch, okay? And think about the allocation of resources, and especially when you're dealing with a case that is important in terms of like, not just justice, because that's always a factor, but when you've got a family in power, long-standing corruption, stuff like that, right? And look at how South Carolina treated it with Murdoch. They put every prosecutor and the state attorney general, Alan Wilson, on that case, and were there every day at trial. They put all their resources into it, right? They had like 50 million people at that prosecutor's table, and they went all in, right? Because this was so important. And then you look at this and you compare it to this trial where we've got Lolly, and that's it. It's not just only one prosecutor, it's just Lolly. And when you compare that and you think about the decision, whoever made the decision, I don't know enough about Massachusetts and who is, in charge there, but somebody made the decision to only put him on this case. And what does that say about this? Like, does this maybe help us understand what is going on and why this is happening? And it's like, it would have been bad enough just to put one prosecutor, even if they were a really good prosecutor, right? but to put Lolly on it, and you think about, this is just my thoughts on what's going on with Lolly, because it makes me wonder if, like, because they know they don't have any evidence, right? Like, this shouldn't have been brought to trial. I don't know why. So this, okay, let me back up. So it's clear this shouldn't have been brought to trial. So my thought is that perhaps try to give the illusion to the victim's family that they are actually doing something. That's why they didn't drop it. But because they know they don't have any type of case, and because the entire investigation was botched and it's just a joke, they just were like, well, we're not going to allocate resources to it. We're just going to put Lolly on it. Right. And I wonder if they even told Lolly, like, hey, guess what? You get to do this. And you're, like, as if it's almost not a promotion, but, like an honor. Like, we think you can do this all on your own. This is a big case. And, like, we think you can, like, this is a gift to you, or whatever, like an opportunity for you or something like that. And to where he thinks it's actually, he's doing a good job. And, like, this is a good case, and, like, they have a case. Like, I wonder if he's just, like, completely has no awareness about what's going on, and, like, he thinks that this is, and it's like almost a joke within, I don't know it, because I just don't know any other explanation for this. Like, but the fact that they didn't allocate resources towards any of this, it just, that there's it is a reflection on their attitude, right, as a state, the Commonwealth rather, which is why I keep making this joke about God save the Commonwealth has a whole new meaning, because even God can't save them. DSN says Lolly's the only one. Exactly. Yep. That's exactly right. That's what I think is going on here. Lolly's the only one bad enough to take this trial against his will, seemingly take one for the team. Yep. That's exactly what I think is going on, because it's the only thing that makes sense. It's like, it's a joke. But the only people who maybe aren't in on the joke would be John O'Keefe's family, which is fucked. So DSN is saying that the STS tone. So I'm curious, what's different about the STS tone? Is there less division and less arguing and more common sense? That would be good. Yeah, at work, there's all shit projects someone has to take. Yep. Yeah, it is. Absolutely. And think about the dichotomy, like, between this and Murdoch. Like, they did the opposite. They took the opposite approach. Like, we're going to restore, he made a mockery out of the entire legal community and, blah, blah. And, like, they took the opposite approach of, like, we're going to stand up against this, and we're going to do it right. And we're going to get justice, and we're going to make sure that happens. And we're going to ensure that happens, and also send a message by allocating all the resources, because we really believe in this, right? It's just like this is the complete opposite of that. So yeah. So, like, even the fact that, like, they didn't interview Tristan until last week, and it was a phone interview, like, it just, okay, DSN says the SDS guests are much more, yeah. Well, I mean, I don't know how you can reach any other conclusion when you are, if you're watching the trial. I mean, we got the closest today. Today when that one girl took the stand and said she saw a dark figure or a dark clump or whatever. That was the first time so far in this trial where the prosecution is actually, there's even been any discussion about there could be a body or something could have happened. Now, it doesn't connect it to Karen Reed at all, but, like, at least it's, like, getting back kind of to not even John O'Keefe, just the possibility that something could have happened. Like, it's how to put it. It's the closest thing we've seen so far related to what the trial is for, because this has just been the Albert trial, right? And this was the first time where it's like, but even that was a complete shit show, and like, not credible. There's just nothing. There's still nothing there, but it was, like, the closest they've come yet to, like, kind of dabbling with the idea that, oh, this is a murder trial. And, like, we're on week 3, and, like, and, like, I said it from the very beginning that I thought it was clear that Lolly is just not even proving, they're not putting on a case. They're just trying to play defense against the defense. But it was really funny as I'm hearing other people kind of say that and notice that, including like some of the people on LawTube and stuff I think I heard some comments about that today. But yeah, I kind of picked up like his questioning from the get-go was just clear that he was trying to, play defense against the defense. So it's just very weird. So yeah, but like, it is really interesting hearing from all the people. And what I've started doing is I'm taking notes now as we go through it, and I'm writing down just the times of when everybody says people came and went, like when they left the waterfall, when they say they got to the house, all that. And I'm writing it down as we go, just to try it, because the prosecution's not giving us a timeline for good reason, obviously. So like, it's so crazy, right? Again, compare it to the Murdoch trial or any trial, right? Like, they're not presenting, there's no exhibits, there's no nothing. And so I'm like, still trying to, it's hard to, anyway, I'm just writing it down as we go so we can try to have a timeline of from what they say, right? And we can put as much stock in that as we feel inclined to do. But what I wanted to do is, let me pull this up. Oh, let me pause my music. Night driving. Woo! So let me pull this up. So this is, you guys remember how I was talking about a couple of, well, I think I probably mentioned it on each of the streams before, but how there was that detective who talked about the incident. That hasn't been revisited yet. I'm going to play this little clip that has that testimony to see what you guys think, because it's just sort of been, it came and went basically. So let's see. The mysterious incident. This is from day 5.
With regard to Sergeant Lang, you told him to make sure that we had statements, your words, we had statements from all the witnesses that were at the scene.
Initial statements, yes.
Does that mean the people inside the house?
Yes.
Okay. Maybe people across the street, if there were people across the street?
No, it didn't include them at the time. It included people that were involved from the prior night's incident, outing, I would call it.
Okay, prior night's incident, and then he changes it outing, I would call it. He kind of tries to walk that back. I'm just going to pause right here. Kind of tries to walk that back. So let's dissect this, because what is he talking about? So I don't know why he didn't then ask about, like, I think it was Alan was there. He continued with his line of questioning. He didn't change it to addressing what he just said, the witness. So, they came in the morning, right, to talk to people, or well, they didn't really do anything, but they came in the morning. So when he says the prior night's incident or outing, I would call it, is he referring to that same night where they went to the waterfall, or because that's what that's the time in question, could he be referring to the night before? But either way, what do you guys think he's referring to? The prior night's incident or outing, I would call it. So that, I feel like, was a slip, but we don't know. He's saying they only interviewed people that were involved. So that would be the people that were also at the waterfall and all that. But so it sounds like something happened, but it was also an outing. So in other words, it sounds like there was something else. He's not referring to what caused, or he's not referring to John O'Keefe's death, right? Because that was at the house, regardless of, even if whoever you're thinking did it, if you're that guy, because he's like obviously pro prosecution. Anyway, like that's not the incident he's referring to, because he calls it an outing. So something else, right? I mean, and it would figure that it must be the night before the waterfall night, because that's where we know where they all were, right? Like, that's what they were all doing. So, hi, Abby, glad you're here. Yeah, I agree that the time frame, now, we don't mean any offense to squirrels, but yes, it is very much a mess. So yeah, so what do you guys think? What do you guys think? Let me play it again for y'all, and let me know what you guys think this could be about.
With regard to Sergeant Lang, you told him to make sure that we had statements, your words, we had statements from all the witnesses that were at the scene.
Initial statements, yes.
Does that mean the people inside the house?
Yes.
Okay. Maybe people across the street, if there were people across the street?
No, it didn't include them at the time. It included people that were involved from the prior night's incident, outing, I would call it.
So like when I first heard that, right, I thought he could have meant, when he says incident, I thought he maybe could have meant the incident involving John O'Keefe that caused him to be dead. But then when he says outing, I would call it, clearly that's not what he's referring to, right? So what do you guys think he's referring to? Because if he is referring to the outing as in the outing at the waterfall, right? Okay, let's break it down. If he is referring to, because again, it could be that same night or maybe the night before, we don't know. Let's say he's referring to the night at the waterfall, right? Because again, this was the next day that he was there. If that's what he's referring to, that means there was an incident that happened while they were all out, and we don't know about that yet. And like, what's the incident though, right? So like, either something happened while they were all out at the waterfall, but somehow that's not come in and we don't have it. I mean, we've been seeing videos and everyone testified, everything's great, you know, or it's something from the prior night. But the word incident means something else happened prior to John O'Keefe's death that involved the same people. That's what I get out of that. What do you guys think? Yeah, when Jen McCabe takes a stand, I hope I'm available because I will definitely want to be live streaming for that so that we can talk about it.
Everyone appeared to be having a good time that night, correct?
Yes,
And that included John and Karen from what you could see, correct?
for the 10, 15 minutes I was there, yes.
Okay. Now, after you left the waterfall, it's fair to say that you didn't know precisely where your son Colin was that night, correct?
Oh boy.
I knew where he was.
Where was he?
He was at his friend Michael Leonetti's.
Michael Leonetti.
He left Michael
We
Leonetti's
hear
to
from
stop
him.
to say happy birthday
What's
to my
they
nephew
call him?
Brian at 34 Fairview Road.
Okay. And you learned that from him, correct?
Yes,
So you had learned that Colin was at 34 Fairview on January 29th of
This reminds me, guys, you know how we were talking about like how, well, I was saying how I thought it was weird that Chris Albert, the whole thing about walking to work is, I'm like, this is weird. I just doesn't make any sense. And I'm like, maybe he's trying to say that because he actually drove. He doesn't want to admit, he doesn't want to make it seem possible that he could have been over there because his story is that he walks home, right? And that he doesn't go to the Albert's house. And I keep wondering, did he go there and pick up Colin, right? And so we heard more testimony today that kind of would support that in the sense that nobody seems to know how Colin got home. And they talk about how he's waiting for his ride to pick him up, but no one knows who it is. And when you look at that's why I'm writing down the times, it actually would work out. I think that that's what maybe happened. Like maybe Chris didn't walk. Maybe that's all bullshit. And he drove and picked Colin up from 34 Fairview. I mean, I suppose he maybe could have even I guess we don't even know what time Colin got there, do we? This is a disaster. We don't know what time Colin got there to the Albert house. So, but potentially it would be while they were still at the waterfall. So then maybe maybe Chris did pick him up and bring him back home. But see, that it would make sense, right? That Chris would want to maybe distance himself from ever being over there. And so I'm wondering if that's part of it too, or being a witness to whatever it is that was going on with Colin, because something's going on, right?
2022, correct?
January 28th. The Friday.
So is it your testimony that you know that Colin left on Friday night as opposed to after midnight on January 29th?
I don't understand what you're asking.
What just occurred is I asked you whether you knew that your son Colin was at your sister-in-law Nicole's and your brother-in-law Brian Albert's house on January 29th, and You just corrected.
I'm sorry. It was after, I'm sorry. It was after midnight.
Okay.
So I got confused. I
Yeah,
apologize.
Not a problem. So the answer to my question is you learned that he was there on January 29th, correct?
Yes, after midnight.
And you now know that that is the same house outside which John O'Keefe was
That's-
found dead that morning, correct?
Yes, I do.
That's interesting. So then that answers my question. If Colin, I mean, if what she's saying is credible, right? If Colin isn't there until after midnight at the Albert house, Chris Albert, I wrote this down from last time. Chris Albert left the waterfall at 12:14, walking according to him, right? But he then, if Colin isn't there until after midnight, it means Chris could have given him a ride over there, and maybe also picked him up, right? He could have done both. So what I was thinking is like if we knew that Colin got to the 34 Fairview at like before midnight, right? It would have been impossible for Chris to have driven him there, but he could have picked him up, but picked him up only. Versus with him being there after midnight, it leaves the window or the possibility open that Chris could have driven him both ways, which would actually put him there as like he would have been double the witness in that case, right? That makes sense.
And one last question. You were interviewed by Trooper Proctor, and it's fair to say you never told him that Colin was there that night, correct?
I don't recall my interview.
I have no further questions. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Lally.
Just briefly on.
Okay, we're gonna skip ahead because Lolly, we're gonna skip ahead. So let me skip ahead.
Point Tom.
Good morning.
Now, with reference to
There's the
you were asking a
OnlyFans.
question about 67 calls over a period from February to September.
Oh, so then we have
Correct.
this whole
That's
hearing.
about
Okay,
7
let's
months.
skip past
Is that right?
that.
Yes.
And roughly 110 days.
Go.
Yes.
This is what we want.
Do you have other friends besides Ms. Proctor?
Yes.
And versus some of your other friends, as far as those phone calls, 60 times over 210 days, is that?
Here we go.
Truth, the whole truth, and
Right.
nothing but the truth.
So Nicole Albert taking the stand.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yep.
All right, Mr. Lally, whenever you're ready.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning.
Please state your name and last name.
I think what I will do is in lieu of having my video the way that I normally have it, as it's, let me see how close it is to being done. Yeah, still, it's at 80%. Good God. Okay, so what I will do, this is me improvising to try to make this work. So I appreciate you guys again for bearing with me. What I'm going to do is, you know how I usually have it labeled? I'm going to create a banner here and put it the day and the witness in case anybody is wondering. So this was from day 9, and this is Nicole Albert direct. And then there we go. Perfect. Okay. So now at least we have that the way we would otherwise. So now we will go ahead and continue.
My name's Nicole Albert, Albert.
And where do you live?
I know.
And how long have you
Yeah.
And prior to moving to Norwood, where did you live? Where did you live prior to that?
Canton.
How long had you lived in Canton?
My whole life.
Now, the specific address,
Okay.
where did you
Okay.
live in Canton prior to your move to Norwood?
34 Fairview Road.
Okay, I'm going to jump past, as Runkle would call it, the begats, was the same thing we hear from everybody. I'm going to go ahead a little bit because we don't need to hear all this a million times.
He had mentioned he was gonna get together with some friends. Maybe
sus,
Friday night
sus.
if anyone's around, any of our aunts or uncles or anyone. Maybe we'll take you out, just local for some apps and drinks or something.
Take him out. Take him out for his birthday.
And coming up to that day of Friday the 28th, what if anything sort of changed in reference to those plans?
Well, they were, the forecast was saying a big snowstorm was coming in, and it looked like it was going to be late Friday into all day Saturday. So I had said to my son, well, obviously doesn't seem like anyone will be able to go out on Saturday night. why don't you just do something with your friends Friday night?
And had you, at that time,
All right, guys, common sense. Why does that not make any sense? She says, well, they were good because his birthday's Saturday. Let's use our logic here. Why is this nonsense? Why is this complete and utter bullshit and makes no sense? Okay, so his birthday's Saturday and they were going to all go out together, right? And then, but the whole thing is this their whole story that they all say is that they were going out on Friday and had made plans to all go out for his birthday, right? But she's saying now, hold on, let's hear it again. This is just okay. We gotta pick this apart because it's just too good. By good, I mean bad.
He had mentioned he was going to get together with some friends on the Saturday night, the 28th.
Okay, on Saturday.
And I had said, okay, well, maybe Friday night, if anyone's around, any of our aunts or uncles or anyone, maybe we'll take you out local for some apps and drinks or something.
On Friday night.
and
That's the
coming up
waterfall
to
plan.
that day of Friday the 28th, what if anything sort of changed in reference to those plans?
Well, they were, the forecast was saying a big snowstorm was coming in and it looked like it was going to be late Friday into all day Saturday. So I had said to my son, well, obviously doesn't seem like anyone will be able to go out on Saturday night. Why don't you just do something with your friends Friday night?
And had you, at time, already made some plans with friends and relatives in regards to going on Friday?
Yeah, I had just mentioned to my daughter Caitlin and my sister-in-law Julie and just had mentioned it to them about possibly getting.
All right, so problems. So it's snowing. So she's saying because of the snow, they should just stay in and he should just do stuff at the house. But yet the rest of them, so the snow only affects Brian Albert being present at Brian Albert's birthday party. It doesn't affect everyone else having Brian Albert's birthday without him. That doesn't make any sense. Like she's saying because it's going to snow, you should just stay home. And like, but yet they still are going to go. And then the other thing is that when witness we just finished, Julie, when she's asked why Brian didn't end up coming, she says he wasn't feeling up to it. So completely different story, completely different stupid made up reason about why Brian Albert wasn't invited to his own birthday party, which this whole thing is just, they're just using him, I feel like, as a scapegoat, which we'll talk more about that when we get to his testimony. They're all using him as a scapegoat. He's Buster Murdoch in this trial. So they're using his birthday. They're using him for his birthday and not even inviting him to the party, basically.
Together Friday.
And just to be clear for the record, when you say your sister-in-law Julie, how is she sort of related to you?
Okay,
She's my husband's brother, Chris's wife.
We know all that. Let's get to some good testimony. Or
he was planning to go home and just sleep, take a nap because he was going to have to get up like in the middle of the night.
All right, here we go. Bingo. All right. So the snowplow guy who we heard from today in the trial, Tristan, let's hear what she says because this whole thing never made any sense whenever anyone else was talking about it. And it still didn't make sense. Let's just review what she says.
There was just some small tables and I think Caitlin and Tristan were already sitting there. So we sat down at the table and we ordered food and just hung out for a little bit, had food and some drinks.
And as far as drinks were concerned,
oh, for fuck's sake. We know they were drinking White Claw.
I was probably drinking White Claw.
White Claw, yeah.
God bless you. Now, later on in the evening, was there any sort of live entertainment there?
Oh,
yes.
Fuck's sake, Lolly.
After we ate, my daughter's boyfriend Tristan left shortly after because he was going to go on travel.
This is interesting, and I don't think I've heard anyone point this out. Remember we did this with Murdoch, and it was really interesting. Let's review what the question was, and then we're going to review the answer. Okay, let's go. Let me back up just a second to the question. I'm not going to go back any further than we need to because Lolly.
Later on in the evening, was there any sort of live entertainment there?
All right. He says, was there any sort of live entertainment there? He's asking about the band. Let's see what she says.
Yes. After we ate, my daughter's boyfriend Tristan left shortly after because he was going to be going out shoveling, working with a plow guy. So he was planning to go home and just sleep, take a nap, because he was going to have to get up like in the middle of the night to
Weasel alert, because like that doesn't make any sense. I mean, she says yes, but she doesn't. Then she just jumps into this completely irrelevant. Like, you know what this is? This is just like what Alex would do, where he wanted to get certain testimony in. This is her. She wanted to get. It's so crazy, right? It's like it's clear she wanted to just get this testimony in that she obviously rehearsed in her head about Tristan with the snowplow, and just this isn't relevant to anything that they're talking about. Nightbot, thank you. Weasel alert. Yeah, we got a weasel alert, big time here. I know, right? That she carried out her white claw. That's another thing too. This is it's insane how they are with like the. I mean, I keep hearing that Massachusetts has like strict rules on drinking, but like there's clearly, it seems like there was underage drinking, right? Because we know about Colin with he seems to be a drinker, and they just don't even bat an eye about that. And then them with like, open containers, supposedly maybe bringing them into other establishments, but leaving with, I mean, we saw John O'Keefe leave with a glass, and they're walking out with white claws. Like, what is going on? That dude, you would not be able to get away with that. And anywhere that I've been in North Carolina, like there's just no way. Like the restaurants, the establishments would stop you. I mean, I don't know if this is just a privilege thing or what, but like, I mean, these are law enforcement officers, many of them. And I mean, clearly this is like drinking and driving seems like it's probably happening. It's pretty insane. Yeah, that's what I thought. It's not legal there either. It's just, the thing is too, like when you are a restaurant or a bar, if somebody does shit like that, like if they, similarly to how we all know people can get in trouble for over serving, I am certain that if you let someone walk out with an open, with a, like you can't, actually, I know for a fact that you can't do that, because like there's places like when I was in college in Boone and stuff, like if you, when like there were places that had like, when it was nice weather and people were out there and they had like beers, and it was sort of like you kind of roam around, but there was a certain threshold where like you couldn't cross that threshold with your beer. And like the people who like worked at the restaurant or the bar, like they would stop you, like they were, because you would be found liable. Like the restaurant or the bar would get in trouble. Like you have to make sure that people aren't leaving your establishment and taking an open container out. Like that's not legal. And so it's crazy. It's crazy. So it's more surprising to me, not that people do it. It's more surprising to me that the people that work at these bars aren't stopping them. That's the crazy part, because they could be in big trouble for that. That's the thing that's crazy. And they are really serious about it too. Like if you work at a restaurant or a bar and you like even unwittingly do something that is, involved with alcohol serving or like this type of nonsense, dude, they can like make sure that you can get a huge fine and never be allowed to work in a like serve alcohol again. Like the punishments are huge, and they punish the server or the bartender as well as the whole restaurant. And it's like really, 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 really serious stuff. So that's why it's so crazy that the people working, I guess I don't know if they're just not paying attention, but still that wouldn't be a defense. Like that would not, if they a law enforcement officer that wasn't somehow related to the family or involved or there partying, like actually doing their job, let's say, had they witnessed it, if the people working at the Waterfall just weren't looking, that would not help them. They would still be on the hook for that. Right. Yeah. Bunch of cops drinking at the beginning of a snowstorm at a local bar. Right. I know. But it's so, I hate this stuff though, right? It's just the double standard is just sickening.
go out and do that. So he had left. So it was just me, Julie, and Caitlin. And at one point, the waitress had said, "Oh, band's going to be setting up where you're sitting."
Now we're back to the band.
So she just kind of moved
I
us
don't know
over to
why
like a high top
Tristan-
table.
She did not need that whole story about
And then
Tristan there.
after you were
That was
moved
just her trying to get it
over
in.
to the high top table, else came in to join you.
Shortly after, I believe my sister Jennifer and her husband Matt came in, I had texted her just saying I was there if she was interested to come by. I think she said
That's
she
how
was
Jen
somewhere
gets there.
else.
Okay.
Did I want to come there? And I said, well, no, I'm already situated.
Oh,
The band's going to
interesting. That might answer another question I had. Wow, that's funny. So that makes it sound like Jen was also at CF McCarthy's because, and someone may have already answered that in the chat. I apologize if I missed it. I was trying to get all this shit set up, but I thought she was going to say she was already somewhere else and say she was at a basketball game, but this is clearly after the basketball game because it sounds like she was already out somewhere. So that makes it seem like Jen was at CF McCarthy's. So that's interesting. So then you've got Chris Albert texting John from while John's at CF McCarthy's and saying, come to the waterfall. And then separately, but at the same time, simultaneously, that's the word, you've got Jen and Nicole texting each other, and she's inviting Jen to come to the waterfall, which is interesting. This is all very like, so in other words, it's like almost they're trying to make it sound like there wasn't like a group discussion, even though they were in the same places, just kind of, I don't know, weird.
Play. I'm just going to stay here. So she said, okay, maybe we'll come there. So maybe 9 as she came in with another couple. I believe they had been at a basketball game.
Oh, okay.
Their daughter's basketball game. So she came in with
So
them.
the Greek couple were also
And
at
again,
CF
just because you
McCarthy's,
say
I
your
guess.
sister Jen and her husband Matt.
I just don't
Their last name?
remember. I know it was
McCabe.
that long ago, but I just.
And she's your younger sister, is that correct?
Yes.
Now, as far as after they came in, who, if anyone else, sort of came in and joined your group?
So-
Shortly after that, I believe Julie's husband, Chris, came in.
Okay, this is
He worked
interesting.
up the street at his pizza.
So in other words, they didn't all leave together from CF McCarthy's. Like it sounds like Jen left with the Greek couple and Karen and came to the waterfall. And then assuming again, it sounds like they were at CF McCarthy's, but John and Karen come later. DSN, do you happen to remember any of that? Like, do you happen to remember from the Greek couple's testimony if they said that they went to CF McCarthy's first? I don't remember. Or if they went straight to the waterfall, because that would answer that question. But either way, it's interesting that John and Karen aren't there yet. What I mean is it would be interesting if they were people were at CF McCarthy's with them, and then they left at different times to go to the waterfall.
Shop. So I believe shortly after 9:30, he came down, he came in. And then in the meantime, my husband was, getting close to being back to the area from driving back from New York. So I had texted him and said, hey, me and Katie and whoever else are here, if you want to come by.
So
And he was like, oh, I'm kind of tired. It's been a long day. And I just
driving.
pushed him a little. Oh, well, Katie's here. She, just come. She wants to see you. So he's like, all right, maybe I'll pop in. So I believe so it was Jen and Matt and the other couple. And then Chris came in. And then I believe maybe around 10, Brian came in.
And
The Greek couple's testimony, I feel like they did say they were at CF McCarthy's because I feel like I remember the wife describing how close it is, how many steps. So that would make it seem like Jen and the Greek couple were at CF McCarthy's with John and Karen, and the three of them left to come to the waterfall before Karen and John did. So I think that might be what it sounds like is what happened. It's stuff these are things that shouldn't be difficult to make clear, right? This isn't that hard, but they're making it hard to figure out what's going on.
was there anybody else that came in and joined you?
Shortly after, maybe 10:30, his friend Brian Higgins had come in.
So your husband, Brian, and Brian Higgins came in separately about a half hour apart.
I think so, yes.
And following that, who, if anyone else, came into the establishment and sort of joined your group at the high top table?
A little bit later, but I think approximately 11, John walked in with his girlfriend,
And when you say John, who is John?
John O'Keefe.
And how did you know John O'Keefe?
Oh, I wanted to see. I was
prior
hold
to that
on. Let me
I
see
didn't know him that well. I think I had
see
only
what time
met him once.
night, prior to that. Following who, if anyone else, came into the establishment and sort of joined your group at the high top table?
A little bit later, but I think approximately 11, John walked in with his girlfriend.
And when you say
Okay, around 11. That she's saying that's when they get there. Okay. DSN says looking up CF McCarthy's. John, Karen. Okay. Thank you so much. So, okay. So then this would mean, what this sounds like then is that Jen came with the Greek couple from the basketball game and went straight to the waterfall. So you've got that happening. And then Jen and Nicole are texting about them coming to the waterfall. And then meanwhile, it is still simultaneously. But you've got Chris and Karen, oh my God, John and Karen at CF McCarthy's with these other folks. And then you've got Brian texting John to come over. So, and the Cameranos did not go to the waterfall, if I recall, right? I feel like we don't hear about them very much. So I think they were just at CF McCarthy's, perhaps. Yeah. Let me know if you remember anybody in the chat.
John, who was John?
John O'Keefe.
And how did you, or did you know John O'Keefe prior to that night?
I didn't know him that well. I think I'd only met him once, maybe twice through my sister. Brief interaction. I think when he first walked in, actually, I didn't recognize him. I think I said to someone, "Oh, who's that?" Because they were kind of walking towards our table. And they said, "Oh, it's John O'Keefe." I said, "Oh." So they came in and they just kind of went to the end of the table where like my sister Jennifer and Matt and Chris and Julie were, because they knew them. I had never met Karen and I'd only met John once or twice. So they kind of just went to the other end of the table where Jen and Matt were, who they know, and Chris and Julie, who John had been neighbors with for a couple of years. So they were all just kind of at that end talking.
And probably pretty well understood, but just to be clear, as far as the sister that you knew of John through, that was your sister that was there, Jennifer?
Yes, Jennifer.
And as far as you referenced his girlfriend, had you ever met his girlfriend before that night?
No.
Had you ever, so you had never met Karen Reed prior to that night, as far as you recall?
Nope.
And at any point in time, did you have any interaction, or what, if any, interaction did you have with either Mr. O'Keefe or Mr.
At one point, John walked by, towards me and my daughter at the table and said, "Hey, I'm going up to the bar. Did you guys need a drink or anything?" And we said, "No, thank you." I think he then kind of stopped and spoke with my husband for a minute, probably was asking him the same thing. Then John went back up to the bar, and then he went back down to, where he'd been standing. And that was the only interaction I had with him.
And as far as your understanding or your knowledge of Mr. O'Keefe, did you know what he did for a living?
Yes.
And what did he do?
I knew he was a Boston policeman.
And was he somebody, if you know, that worked with your husband?
No, I don't believe he ever worked with my husband. I don't believe they ever crossed paths at work. I think they were in different areas of, the job.
Fair to say Boston Police Department is a relatively large department.
Oh, lolly.
Yeah, it's like 3,000.
Now, with reference,
So it's good. I'm actually kind of glad that I got to test this out with playing it from YouTube, because this just, now I know that I can do this for whenever A, something happens with a video file, or B, wanting to go live as the trial's happening. Good to know. Glad I finally tested it out. Okay, thank you, DSN. So we got our research team here. 10 o'clock p.m. Brian Albert arrives. Waterfall. Okay, yeah, 10:54. She says around 11, so she's pretty close. Thank you. So 10 o'clock. He arrives. Now, again, we haven't gotten to his testimony yet, but I would assume he says that. All right. I mean, and actually, I need that. That's right. So I'm trying to write down my notes in terms of what the witnesses say about their story, so that way also we can see if there are any ones any of them contradict. So I'm trying to keep track of it by witness. So let me write Nicole. And so she said, did she see what time she got there? How do I not have that written down? Did she say what time she got there? I don't remember. I'm just reviewing my notes here. I don't know why. Does she not say that? Let's see. Let me rewind it just a second and see if she says what time she gets there.
And they just kind of went to the end of the table where like my sister Jen was so high top table.
Day
Oh,
of,
Stan.
Friday the 28th, what if anything sort of changed in reference to those plans?
Well, they were, the forecast was saying a big snowstorm was
Right.
coming in and it looked like
Do
it was
this.
going to be late Friday into all day Saturday.
Heard
So I
that.
said to myself, obviously, it seemed like I had to go out.
At that time, already made some plans with friends and relatives in regards to going on Friday.
Yeah, I had just mentioned to my daughter Caitlin and my sister-in-law Julie, and
Go for
they
it.
drove home. A friend of his had driven, so he got a ride back with them on Friday.
And only if you know, but as far as that friend that he drove back with on Friday, do you know who that was?
The friend who I believe had the truck there and drove was Brian Higgins.
And is that someone, Mr.
Okay, we
Higgins,
can
that
go
you were
forward.
familiar with prior to that date in January?
10 minutes down the road from our house. My sister-in-law Julie picked me up at my house maybe 7:30, 7:45, and we went to the Waterfall, and I believe my daughter and her boyfriend Tristan were already inside at a table.
So that's,
And
she doesn't actually say what time she gets there, does she? Okay, I'm not crazy after all. So, Jesus Christ. She says what time, interesting. She says what time Julie comes and picks her up from her house. Let me rewind that again. That's interesting. It's so interesting when they don't answer a question. You know what I mean?
10 minutes down the road from our house. My sister-in-law Julie picked me up at my house maybe 7:30, 7:45.
Wow. So you could assume they get there around 8, but she doesn't actually say it. Oh, thank you, DSN. Thank you. Yeah, I was trying to see what time she arrives because so presumably around 8 o'clock. And that would mean her and Julie both arrive because they ride together. Again, it's a proxy. So she doesn't actually say what time she gets there. So fucking hell. You go back to where we were ish.
No, I don't believe he ever worked with my husband's work. I think they were in different areas of,
Police department is a relatively large department, correct?
yeah, it's like 3,000.
Now, with reference to Ms. Reed, what if any interaction did you have with her that night?
I had none. I don't believe we spoke or we were introduced or anything. I don't think we spoke at all.
Now, turning back to Mr. O'Keefe just for a second, if you recall, what if anything do you recall him to be wearing as far as clothing was concerned during your interaction?
I believe he had a hat on, some sort of just sweatshirt, jeans, and sneakers.
Okay. We can
At
skip
any
this.
point
We
in time,
know he doesn't have
saw him or was
scratches.
talking?
God, lolly. Also, yes, everyone, same questions.
About what time was it, if you know, about what time was it that you left the bar?
A little before 12, 12-ish.
And who, if anyone, left with you?
It was me, my daughter, Caitlin, and my husband.
And how did you get?
Is that what you're referring to? Or maybe it didn't pop and maybe it didn't show up in the chat? I don't know. Am I missing something? You're saying you're wanting to draw my attention to this part, maybe? I don't know. I think that's what you're referring to, but I think I read that. I just don't remember like the Camaranos, they didn't go to the Waterfall, right? They only went to see if McCarthy's. That was what I remember reading that and asking that question out loud. Or just, but I think that's probably I think that's accurate. I think they didn't go to the Waterfall.
Bless you. How did you get from the Waterfall back to your house on Thursday?
My husband drove the three of us back to Fairview Road.
And when you came outside of the Waterfall and were sort of, getting into your car and about to drive home, what if anything did you observe as far as the weather or what was
Oh,
going
for
on?
fuck's sake, with the snow.
It was just starting to snow a
We're
little.
skipping that part with the snow.
Who, if anyone, was there when you got there?
When we arrived and I came in, my son was sitting there with his two friends and my nephew Colin, who is Julie and Chris's son. He was there. I kind of bumped into him when I walked in. I
Sorry.
didn't realize
I need to see what time she says she leaves. Hold on.
anyone sitting with us had come.
Okay.
So as far as you knew, you just communicated that to your sister Jennifer, and whatever happened after that happened.
Yes.
And when you say sort of the band was wrapping up and the bar was sort of winding down, is that correct?
Yes.
About what time was that?
Like 12:45.
And
12:45.
About what
What?
time was it, if you know, about what time was it that you left the bar?
A little before 12, 12-ish.
And who, if anyone, left with you?
She
It
mean
was me,
11:45? Hold on.
my daughter, Caitlin, and my husband.
Hang on. What the hell?
And,
Hold on. Did she mean 11:45?
Gathering up my stuff, and I got ready to leave. It may have been mentioned at the table, but I had no idea, if anyone else was interested in doing that or wanted to do it. I had just said it to my sister.
And if anybody else had wanted to join or come along, would that have been an issue?
Oh, no, I would have no problem if anyone sitting with us had come.
But as far as you knew, you just communicated that to your sister Jennifer, and whatever happened after that happened.
Yes.
And when you say sort of the band was wrapping up and the bar sort of winding down, is that correct?
Yes.
About what time was that?
Like 12:45.
Yeah. She says 12:45, but she must mean 11:45?
And
Weird.
about what time was it, if you know, about what time was it that you left the bar?
A little before 12, 12-ish.
And who, if anyone, left with
All
you?
right. So
It was
now we need
me,
to go back to
my daughter,
arrival
Caitlin,
at
and my
the house.
husband.
Arrival at the house.
And how did you get, bless you,
Brian, but I'm about to leave. My ride's about to be here. I said, okay.
and let me back up just for a minute. So when you arrived there, your husband Brian is driving. Where does he park in relation to the house?
We pulled into the driveway.
And typically, is there sort of an order to it as far as where the cars go, like his car?
Yeah,
versus
see,
your
Brian
car
tells a whole
versus any
story
other car?
with Higgins.
Not really. No.
Okay,
Recall
interesting.
on that evening, which driveway he
This is interesting because y'all, this is interesting. This is why it's important to go back. She's telling a different story, man. I'm telling you. So we hear from Brian after her, right? But so now we know now Brian talks about this whole story involving Brian Higgins, right? With like, he says that there's this whole backing out and swapping of the parking spots. Remember? I think that's why Lolly keeps asking her these questions, because he's trying to hint to her, wait, hang on. You're supposed to say that more happened, right? We hear about the Jeep with the snowplow on it and all that, right? And which, by the way, side note, I've been thinking about how I could see how a snowplow where it has the scoopy bit and then it has like the edges, I could see that being responsible perhaps for the gash on John's head that I accidentally saw, by the way, side note. But she's not describing what her husband describes about this parking. Let me go back just a second. It's interesting. Like it's easy to forget sometimes when there's these inconsistencies when you're listening to it all in real time and you can't go back and review it. So that's why
anyone was there when you got there.
When we arrived and I came in, my son was sitting there with his two friends and my nephew Colin, who is Julie and Chris's son. He was there. I kind of bumped into him when I walked in. I didn't realize he was there. I said, oh, hey, what are you doing here? And he said, oh, I just stopped by to see Brian, but I'm about to leave. My ride's about to be here. And I said, oh, okay.
I have a thought. I wonder if this whole thing with Brian's birthday and them using him as a scapegoat is a way to explain why Colin stopped by briefly. That I wonder if that is it, because none of it makes any sense. If they're trying to think of a way to explain why Colin, I'm just speculating, right? They need a way to explain why Colin stopped by briefly. And also why Brian would have been home and they were out, like this birthday thing of like, well, his plans changed and now they're going to hang out at the house because of the snow. It still doesn't make any sense because they go out without him, but still, it was, I guess, the best they could come up with as to explain why Brian's at the house with his friends and it's his birthday, and then to make it a reason for why Colin would stop by, right? Does that make sense?
And let me back up just for a minute.
Correct.
So when you,
Yes, and
when
that's
you
what I'm
arrive
saying.
there, your husband driving, where does he place you into the house?
We pulled a drive.
And typically, there's sort of an order to it as far as where the cars go, like,
This is the part where she's fucks up because she doesn't match her husband's story about the snowplow. But yeah, or sorry, yeah, about the parking. But yeah, he had a snowplow on his Jeep, which is weird for a number of reasons. But he's the only, Brian, I think, is the only one who talks about that. But he goes into detail. We don't hear any of this from her, even though he's kind of trying to bait her into describing more about what's going on there. But yeah, the edges, if you guys are familiar with snowplows and how they have those sharp edges, that to me, I could see being responsible for that gash that I accidentally saw. Oh, 7:30. Oh, I didn't know I was okay. I didn't know I was looking for something from 7:30. Hold on, let me go scroll and find it. I guess I'm sorry if I missed it from earlier. Hold on. Oh, starting with 7:30, not at 7. Hold on. Okay. I don't recall seeing it. Let me look. I could have just not seen it. Was it a long time ago, DSN? I'm not seeing it. I wonder if it just didn't come through for some reason, like YouTube. I don't know. I am not seeing anything about 7:30 DSN. If you can just text it again. I'm sorry. It's not, I'm not seeing it. But yeah, so this is just really interesting because we hear she just, but you know what? Also, maybe it's interesting that she leaves it out, right? She leaves out the thing about the snowplow and the cars and the backing up and the exchanging of the cars. I mean, it's not smart if your husband's going to give different testimony, but I mean, I don't know. It's, again, it's maybe just conveniently forgetting to leave that out or whatever.
his car versus your car versus any other car?
Not really.
See?
No.
He's trying to get her to say
Which
it.
side of the driveway he pulled into, the left?
I believe it was in front of the left garage.
Wow, and she's not even amazing.
And
Amazing.
when you come into and
Wow.
enter into the
Wow.
house, when you were living there at 34 Fair,
Because
was there-
he makes a big deal about it.
How many
Brian
doors
does.
are there sort of on
Wow.
the house?
Well, there's a side door by the garage, and then there's like a front door in the front of the house.
Wow.
And is there any sort of particular rhyme or reason as to which door you would be entering?
We usually use the side door. You know, initially I tried to,
Fast forward.
I didn't like that because the side door walked right into the family.
Talking now about how long a period of time is that?
Couple minutes, not even, just a quick interaction.
And then he left. You didn't see him for the rest of the night.
No.
And then you come into the home, and again, I'm sorry, who was there sort of initially when you come?
So my son Brian and his two friends Julie and Sarah were just kind of sitting at the kitchen table in like the dining room area of the kitchen.
If you could explain to the jury sort of the layout of your home at Fairview. So you walk into a foyer, and then where is the kitchen related to that?
Well, if you walk in, if you go to the right,
Get
it's
past
like an open
this.
doorway, and that's kind of like the dining
I'm
room
not
part of the
worried
kitchen.
about this. Let's go forward.
After or before?
Yeah, he came in the same time. I mean, I think he might have pulled up to our house before us.
Ooh, this is probably
We got out of the
Higgins.
car and went right into the house. So I assume he just came in
Okay, hold
at the
on.
same time.
Interesting,
any
dude.
idea
Is
for-
this Lolly circling back? Hold on, the way he wanted her to. Not that he has a
Correct.
Yeah.
plan, but
Yeah.
And is that something that you did sort of continuously throughout the evening, or?
Yeah. Yeah. That's kind of what I do.
Now, after you arrived home, who, if anyone else, came by your house?
Well, once we were there, it was me and my daughter and my husband and Brian Higgins had come in. And then it was, Brian and his friends were already there.
this is insane. Miguel said it too, because I feel like I heard that. But Brian Higgins gets to the house first before them. And then they would enter at the same time because they do the whole car swapping thing. This is crazy because she's making it sound like he arrives after them. Interesting. So looking at, do you guys remember what time they get the text message? Do you guys remember what time they're texting Jen asking, I mean, by they, I mean Karen and John. They text Jen and they're asking where the house is. Does anyone have that time offhand of that text message? And let me look at this. Everything's happening just after midnight, right? Like all this shit's happening just after midnight. And it would look like Colin is there really quickly. Like I can see how they would need an excuse, because if Colin, unless she's lying about when Colin gets there, maybe he gets there earlier. But if Colin does get there after midnight, they don't get home until around midnight. And she says he's like leaving as they get there. Literally, it makes sense, right? They're trying to make it seem like he literally like popped in, hi, bye. Like that's what it sounds like to me. They're trying to make it seem like Colin was there for literally 10 seconds. And it's all in the same window where everyone else seems to be arriving at the house, right? Like all these different things are happening. It's also around the time that Brian Higgins is trading around the vehicles with the snowplow. I have so many questions. Thank you, DSN. 12:14. Do you want to resend the text message or the chat about 7:30? So that's when, and it's at 12:14. Of course it is. Of course it is. That's fishy to me. Also at 12:14. Let me write this down. Hold on. 12:14. Thank you. Yeah. Here's the thing. So also at 12:14, and this is confirmed because of the camera. 12:14, according to the camera footage at the waterfall, is when Chris Albert leaves the waterfall. And remember, that whole thing seems fishy to me about him, the walking thing. Again, that could be trying to distance from something. So he's interesting. So it sounds like what's all happening at the same time is John and Karen are trying to find the house. They're hearing from Jen. They're trying to find the house. Also, Colin is popping in for a quick hi-bye situation. At the very least, he's either coming or going or both. And Chris Albert is leaving the waterfall. Now, if he drives, which I feel like the walk is not truthful in my opinion. See, he's trying to say that the walk would put him there around 12:20. I remember I wrote all this down from the notes from when he testified. He's saying he says he doesn't go there, right? And he goes home and he gets home at 12:20. But if he does drive instead of walk, it changes this whole thing that he leaves the waterfall at 12:14. And again, I'm still thinking he might have picked up Colin or whatever. Okay. Okay, thank you so much, DSN. Yeah, so she says now, okay, how is that? What source is that from? Because her testimony, I want to figure out what thing is wrong. Her testimony is that she gets picked up at 7:45 from the house by Julie, which would put them there after 7:45. So I'm curious, what source is this from? Like, is she, like, in other words, is she wrong about that time or whatever? Because, like, that matters, right? That's part of why I'm writing all this down, is to figure out who's lying about what, or trying to. I got a lot of practice of doing this with Murdoch, so that's good. Yeah, so I'm wondering where the 7:30 came from, because that matters. If it was another witness, okay, court TV timeline. Fuck, because that could be from anything. I wonder if they're basing that off of Julie's testimony or if they're basing it off of, I mean, it's interesting, right, guys? You know what's not come in at all to evidence is the surveillance footage of anybody arriving, right? It's only when they're getting ready to leave. Why? Why don't we have that? I mean, it's up to the prosecution. I mean, I guess the defense could enter it into evidence, but it's weird that the prosecution's not. I mean, right? It's their case. So, like, why do we, like, that camera's running the whole time, right? Inside. I just don't understand why we're not seeing this. Like, all this shit should be knowable from start to finish, when people get there and how they interact and what goes on and when everybody's doing, and all we see is them leaving. It's fucking weird, man. I don't like that at all. So Okay, so I'll make a note that something said 7:30 that they arrive, but that she says what's important to me, because I'm going witness by witness, is what she's saying happened, because then we can contradict it with other people. I still think it's really interesting. This 12-14 time period, a lot of things are happening, right? It's weird. But I think there's something, that whole thing with the snowplow. And it's also interesting. What Brian is the only one that mentions it. Why does no one else mention the snowplow? Because like that's a distinguished, like that's a memorable thing. Like you see a snowplow on a Jeep. I don't know. Right. Great point, DSN. Instead of showing the tape, Lally asked the same witness asked every witness the same questions. Yep. Great point. Yeah. Remember, yeah, there's a shocking lack of evidence in this, including exhibits, including, video footage. I mean, it's only those couple clips, and it's all the same. It's the same. It's them play fighting at the bar, the band packing up, and then like people leaving with the flag, basically. So, yeah, we're definitely going to learn a lot more whenever the Lolly finally gives up and sits down, and then it's although, yeah, okay, let me finish my thought. I was just saying, then the defense starts their case, and however, again, I keep thinking to myself, there's going to be a motion for directed verdict because there always is, and fuck it, like if they get that, if that's granted, that's what should happen. But then we may not learn much more, because, like, I'm thinking to myself, like, the defense's case in chief, they can put on other evidence that the prosecution's not, and they can call other witnesses, but what they shouldn't get to that, because they should be granted a motion for a directed verdict if not guilty. And then, but in that case, we may not get to learn other stuff. So I don't know. Our curiosity and solving all this doesn't matter as much, obviously, as justice. So it goes without saying. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's crazy.
There, and then my sister Jen and her husband Matt came in maybe like 12:15ish.
Okay. We
Higgins,
have
did he come in around the same?
another one at the same time period. So 12:15, she's saying Jen and Matt come to the house. Jen and Matt. See, Matt, again, I'm like, he's like a shadow figure in this case. Like he's balls deep in all of it, like Jen is, but like we hear even less about him. It almost makes me wonder, feel a little bit more suspicious. Jen and Matt arrive at the house, 12:15. 12:15ish. I mean, 12:15ish could be 12:14. I mean, it could be, right? The magic number in this case.
Time as you would he come after, before?
Yeah, he came in the same time. I mean, I think he might have pulled up to our house before us. But we got out of the car and went right into the house. So I assume he just came in, basically around the same time.
That was
Do you
his
have any idea
his
as to
time
what
trying to get her to
Mr. Higgins
answer the
was
question
driving
about
that night
Brian
when he
Higgins.
came
The way
out?
he
I believe it
wants
was a Jeep.
to- There's the
Do you
Jeep.
have any idea where, in reference to your house,
Interesting.
where Mr.
He's still
Higgins
trying.
parked?
He never
I'm
gives
not
up.
sure. I thought it was out on the curb, facing up Fairview, maybe by our mailbox.
This is really incredible, because this is like the 6th time he's prompted her to try to answer this question differently. It's really interesting. And she's kind of now recalling that there's supposed to be something about the Jeep, but clearly she's not clear on it the way Brian Albert is.
Not 100% sure.
Wow.
Not something you were particularly paying attention to?
No.
And at some point after you and your daughter and your husband and then Mr. Higgins comes along, how long a period of time is it between?
I mean, these are just a few of the questions, right? I mean, like, they would have had, even according to these witnesses, all the Alberts, according to their testimony, they would have had to pass each other, right? They would have had to, like, even if it was out in the road, they would have had. And also, you've got fucking Higgins moving around the fucking snowplow, swapping of the vehicles, which we're going to get to again. We'll hear it because we're going to hear Brian's testimony, Brian Albert Sr., well, and Jr. But anyway. first we'll hear from Brian Albert Sr. I mean, did he ever step into the house is a great question. And it's like, they never investigated. They never went inside and investigated the house. So like, we don't even know. Like, I mean, I will say, thinking about his injuries again, God knows if you'll even hear from a medical examiner, unless the defense brings one in. But like, I would say that from my view, my personal opinion, the arm injuries definitely look like dog. And I would say that the head injury definitely looks like either the fire hydrant or it could be that snowplow. Perhaps those are just possibilities, right? The black eyes look like someone punched him. The face injuries look like the face injuries look like someone punched him or like took a bat to his face or something. It was really bad. It was way worse than than from reading about, and the way it was described, it looked a lot worse than that. Yeah, it is. It is absolutely. Happy to see you again as well. Need some Z's. Right, it's the Albert straw. Yeah, I was saying actually in the Discord that I almost thought about changing the thumbnail for these to calling it the Albert trial. But then people might not know what I'm talking about and they may not realize that it is actually what I'm talking about. But yeah, anyway, I actually was thinking about doing that from after like the first couple days when I was like, I'm going to start doing recaps. I was like, yeah, this is definitely, could just rename it that. Yeah. Yeah. Like I said, the closest they've come, and it's still not even remotely anything. The closest they've come to even getting around the idea that any crime was committed and anybody was hurt, and is with that witness with the possibly seeing a dark clump on the ground, not even identifying it as a human, right? Or that there was anything wrong, or that there was anything fishy. She didn't see any of the other stuff. They ask her about the hat, the shoes, whatever the fuck. It's just, I think she literally calls it a clump. And again, we'll get to that. But like, that's the closest they've come to even getting back to addressing, or okay, let me rephrase that. Addressing for the first time that anything maybe happened, because this has just all been, don't go chasing waterfalls. But we've been chasing waterfalls, haven't we? Like, that's what's been happening. We've just been chasing waterfalls.
Your arrival in the home, and then when Miss McCabe and her husband come.
It's like we're at least
15 minutes, 20 minutes.
Close to territory talk.
And as far as your nephew
But we
Colin,
still
when
need to defend
he
it.
had left, was
We
Miss
still
McCabe
need
and her husband there?
we still need a reason for someone to
And when Miss McCabe and her
We're
husband
just
come,
so far.
where is
So
it
far
that,
from a murder trial.
while you're at your house, where is it that everybody sort of
They came in and they sat down at the kitchen table with Brian and his two friends. And then I believe my daughter, Caitlin, was.
I skipped over earlier with the doors. I just keep thinking to myself, remember when I was like, oh, we don't need to hear about the damn doors? I always go back to this. I have to remember that Lally's questions are all on the defense. And that while they seem pointless because if you're thinking about it from the way it should be happening, it is pointless. I'm wondering this, what if the reason he is getting all that detail about, right? Like, okay, all the detail. It's like, why does this matter? Why does this matter? So, right, he asked about the doors and what room they go in and where do the foyer, and there's all this the layout of the house with the doors and the foyer. And it's like, why do we need all this? Who cares? I mean, if you really think about it, it would be to try to make it seem like that's what happened when it's not what happened, right? And I'm wondering, it just dawned on me now, like maybe the reason he's going on about the doors and then what happens when they go inside and which door they use. Maybe they went in the basement door, right? Maybe this is how the basement gets involved. Maybe that's how people entered, or maybe that's how they entered that night. But like, it really isn't necessary. We don't need to know about the doors. The only way it can be, but from the way Lally approaches this, right, it would be necessary if you're trying to refute something the defense is going to say. So that's something else we can keep in mind. I feel like the only way the jury, this is from Meats and Z's, I feel like the only way the jury can think she's guilty if they were bought or something. Yeah. Yeah, right. You're saying like if the jury was fixed. Yeah. Like if Alex Murdoch got involved. Luckily he can't because he's in prison. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I agree. Yeah. So that's something too. Like, I haven't heard anybody say anything about that being these are just my own speculations because I don't like, so I'm speculating that I just literally thought of it. Like, I don't know, like I'm speculating what if that is a potential thing that happened, or maybe something that the defense is going to suggest? But it hadn't occurred to me that maybe people came in through the basement, but I wonder if there's, and there was a lot of time spent on the doors, and we will get to that with Brian's testimony here shortly. But there was a lot of time spent on the doors, right? With the basement doors and the bulkhead. And I was very confused. I don't know what a bulkhead is, but there was a lot of, and then we see some footage of it. I don't know. Again, if you think about it, it's like, we know that there's talk of the basement, things may be happening, but I wonder if there's also the potential element of like, maybe they walked in through that door. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. Hopefully.
Sitting at the table as well.
And back at your home after leaving the bar, was there any drinking that was going on there afterward?
Yeah.
And
Yeah, we just kept drinking. Drink.
about how long, skip forward to a little bit, people had left your home. About how long a period of time was it that people, from the time that you arrived back in Waterfall to the time that people sort of left and you closed down?
By the time everyone left, it was probably close to 2.
And who was the last person that left?
My daughter, Caitlin.
And you know how it was that she left, or who, if anyone, picked her up?
Her boyfriend, Tristan, picked her up because, like I said, he was going to have to get up anyways overnight to
No, wrong.
do the shoveling, plowing thing. So I think she didn't want to get stuck probably at our house for the next day. So she had just said, hey, can you?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to end your answer there. Next question, Mr. Lally.
Yeah, that objection makes sense.
Prior to your daughter Kate.
I mean, it's just another thing that just makes no fucking sense about this whole thing with Tristan and snowplow. I mean, no person with common sense is going to buy a lot of this stuff. Like the whole thing with Brian's birthday, Colin showing up and coming, going. I mean, and then like this, it's just, there's just, and not to mention that, going back to the shitty investigation, we know, remember, they were never separated and they were all interviewed together in the same room. So like, it's a given that they practiced a story, right? It's a given that they talked about what they were going to do and get their story straight. Like that's a given, right? In this case. So.
In leaving, when I ask you this, as far as people leaving from your house.
Now, one thing I will say is that this is a great example of how even when you have people do that and they've practiced a story and this is the only thing in my mind that logic, using common sense, could be happening here, right? They've practiced a story and they're trying to get their story straight. This is a great example of how even when you do that, you can get details wrong from each other, right? And the great example of that is this whole thing with Brian Higgins with the Jeep and the snowplow and how they swapped cars around and shit. Because again, we hear that from Brian Albert Sr. and it just goes to show you, like, Nicole didn't get any of that. So it seems like testimony that Lally really wanted in. And I wonder, too, if, like, because she didn't testify to it and Lally wanted that in for some reason, I guess maybe trying to put Brian somewhere at a certain time. And again, it's right at that same fucking 12-15 time frame, right? We know that Lally was talking. God, this is so fun. We know that Lally was meeting with him, right? And they were discussing testimony. I wonder if Lally was like reminded Brian, hey, we need to get this in about Brian Higgins with the tow truck on the Jeep, or the snowplow on the Jeep. And this whatever rigmarole with switching the cart, like, because he really tries to get it out of her and doesn't. But then we hear it right after her from Brian, and we know that they've talked. So by them, I mean Lally, and we know he talks to Brian. So. Oh, God. Yeah, definitely.
What was sort of the order of how people left and when people left?
I believe Brian Higgins left first, approximately 1:30ish. Then Jennifer and Matt and Brian's two friends left 12:45, 12:50. And then, 1:45, 1:50, I'm sorry. And then Caitlin was probably closer to 2.
And when your daughter Caitlin left, who, if anyone, was left downstairs and sort of awake between yourself and the other people that lived there?
Just me.
So your son and your husband have both gone up to bed at that point?
Yes.
And at any point in time, but you mentioned that there were a number of people that were sort of around the table in the kitchen, correct?
Mm-hmm.
And
yes?
Yes, sorry.
where did anybody else go sort of around your house during that time?
I know at one point, my
Yes.
husband and his friend
All
Brian
right.
were in a
I was really excited to get to this part in the testimony because we hear it from her and we hear it from Brian. I was really excited to get to this. This is dumb. Another thing. This is another thing that I just don't. This is. They could they not have come up with a better? There's clearly a reason that they need to explain Brian Higgins going somewhere else in the house, or them two being gone from the group. Think about this, guys, because this makes no fucking sense. Brian Higgins and Brian Albert leave the group and then they go and look at pictures for literally 1 or 2 minutes. I'm sorry. This is the dumbest excuse. So that is for a reason. They're having to either explain why they left the group, just the two of them, unless they were, it was some hanky panky going on. Just that's a nod to the upcoming jokes that will be happening when we get to the phone calls, butt dials. Or they needed to explain why Brian was in a particular part of the house. Now, considering there was no investigation done that would be looking for DNA or whatever, obviously the house wasn't searched. My guess is it's the first reason. They needed to have a reason why those two men left the group for like a very short period of time and came back. And I think that's significant. That's significant, right? It's like, what are they trying to hide? What that means is something happened here, right? During this time. But it's
the
not what they're
family
saying.
room. So I kind of went in there and was talking to them. We had some shelves on the wall that just had a bunch of pictures, old pictures from our wedding or when Brian was in the Marines. So we would just kind of look at them, laughing, talking about them. We stood in there for a little bit talking. And then eventually we just moved into the kitchen
He
area
makes it
where
sound
this
like
was.
she was there, but Brian described it as
Acknowledge
just
that Mr.
him
Higgins
and
been
other
over your
Brian.
house, at any point prior?
He
Oh,
may
fucking
have
hell.
been at our house for a graduation party, but I wasn't sure if he had ever like been inside because the party was outside. It was a cookout. So I don't know if he'd been in that
Another
part
thing-
of my house.
Another thing. They go into that with Brian too. Lolly goes into that with Brian too. Again, what's the reasoning behind that? Trying to explain why he maybe is familiar with the house, or trying to explain why he's not so familiar with the house. There's some reason, right, with the interior. Because I remember that thinking that was weird when Lolly goes into that with Brian. Like, this is weird. What's the deal here? You know, like they even make a comment about, does he go in to use the bathroom or not? It's like, what is happening? So this is all indicative of things to come, right? In my opinion, from the defense, if they end up doing a case in chief because they don't get granted a motion for directed verdict, because clearly there's no point to any of this. And furthermore, it has nothing to do with John or Karen, right? To our knowledge, unless John's in the house, maybe then in that case it's relevant, but not in the way that the prosecution hopes it is.
Now, as far as the outside of your house, at any point in time during the course of the evening, did you hear anything unusual, see anything unusual outside of your house?
I didn't.
At any point in time, did you go, were you aware of anybody coming to your house that didn't come in?
Out the window or at the door. And his friend Julie, she went out the side door, and I said, "Oh," to Brian, "Oh, is Julie leaving?" And he said, "Well, no, she had asked her brother for a ride."
Objection, Your Honor.
Sustained. So
Right.
no conversation, and Mr.
So that's another thing too. So that's another thing that's weird. I feel like, again, we'll get to review it, and I only heard it once through today, but we need to figure out, like, why the hell there was the weird. There's so much fucking funny business. Like, why was the whole thing about the brother was going to give her a ride, the friend, right, a ride home, and then like he's there, but then she never gets in the vehicle, and the vehicle like moves. I have so many questions. It's just another thing. And you can hear her trying to say it, right? To like, hopefully you can see my mouse. You can hear her saying it, right? It's trying to set it up as if it's like they got their, they practiced their story or whatever. It's just, they left any notion that common sense would factor in here. Like, even if you guys got all the details right along with each other, like there wasn't any discrepancies, they're completely ignoring the fact that it doesn't align with any type of common sense. And jurors are always told to rely on their common sense and to use their common sense and to, be reasonable and all that. So, good night, DSN. I'm glad you were here. We will have a lot more to go through tomorrow, but I'm sure we'll be chatting throughout the day. And I like I said, I might go live as well with some testimony tomorrow. So we'll see what happens. But yeah, it's like they just completely disregard. It's in a way, it's almost like that's how little they think of the jurors, right? Like the jurors are going to not have common sense or something to where they're going to just see through this bullshit. Like that's kind of offensive, right?
So Mr. Lally's going to ask another question.
Okay.
So you saw your son's friend Julie go outside?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And
So that has to be a
Sorry.
yes or no. Okay.
They have got to be so confused.
at some point, did Julie come back into the house?
Yes.
And about how long?
I can only imagine. I think about them all the time. These poor jurors. They're probably like, I know they can't talk to each other, but they're probably like thinking to themselves, I thought this was a murder trial. Are we in the wrong courtroom? Like, what is going on? And I would imagine that they're probably like, after hearing all this testimony, even from just like the detectives, but then the Alberts, they're probably like, it seems like they're being like, they're the ones that did something wrong. And then it's like, well, if that's the case, the bigger question, why aren't they being charged if they did something wrong, right? Like, oh God, it would really suck, right? Because like you want to trust, if you're a juror there, you want to trust that your state and your, is going to do the right thing by the public and charge the right people with a crime and not leave someone who potentially murdered somebody out free to roam around, right? You don't want that. I mean, I wonder if they feel frightened in any way, right? Like, is this unsolved still? I don't know. Frustrated and confused is just, I'm sure, without a doubt. It's awful. I feel awful for them. And Lolly's not making it any easier by, well, in any way, but it's so interesting too, because like that's how you see the defense always comes in and then things become more clear, right? With their questioning and with the answers that are elicited. But we're still just missing so many pieces to this.
If you know that she was outside before she came back in.
I don't think it was very long, couple minutes.
Yeah.
And
Except that she didn't seem drunk.
over the course of the entirety of the evening,
Which,
at any
I don't know
point
how
that
that helps
anybody
their
else,
case,
other
but,
than the people that you
that's
talked
what we've
about,
heard.
who come into your house.
We've heard that her and John were having a
And
great time at the
specifically,
bar.
John O'Keefe or
And they were
Karen
lovey-dovey.
Reed that you saw at the bar earlier that night.
That was
at any
a
point
long
in
time
on
ago
the evening
that
of
we
the
heard it.
28th or the early morning of the 29th. Did either of those people come into your house?
No, they never came into my home.
And at any point in time, even on that evening or that early morning of the 29th, were you aware that they were coming to your house?
I actually wasn't. I think when I was in the other room with my husband and his friend, I had missed the conversations about Jennifer
Absolutely.
reaching out with John, or her texting him and him texting her about where we lived. I didn't even realize.
I think I agree with that. I think that's especially true. So Needs Some Z says, I'm always think that if I'm thinking something while watching a trial, there's got to be at least a few jurors thinking the same thing. I think that's especially true also if you come in like the way I have, and I know others have with this trial, without knowing anything ahead of time. I think, again, that's another benefit to that approach, because you really can rely on your own interpretation as being maybe more accurate as to what a juror would think, right? If you don't know anything about it ahead of time and you're learning it alongside the jurors as they are, without having any external or outside sources of information, yeah, definitely even more so. But yeah, even without that, like, it's just, I mean, I guess it does make sense too, because if you want to kind of go from the approach that the jurors without having any bias, then yeah, it would definitely be better to go in with a clean slate. I mean, this is the first trial, I know I've said this before probably, but this is the first trial that I've followed. Well, there's been maybe a couple others that I followed that I didn't really know anything about, but this is the first trial that is of this magnitude in terms of how long it's going, and just like the charges and just the depth of it. And especially one that a lot of people had been deep diving for a long time prior. This would be like the first one of that, if that I've went into without knowing anything, and just like a completely clean slate. And I'm glad that I did. I'm really glad that I did. Yeah, that's the way to go. So I mean, that's the thing is like, so when you've got people like us that are confused and frustrated, like all the things that we are voicing and other people are voicing, 100%. The juror, there's probably somebody on the jury that's even like angry about it. You know what I mean? Like I feel when I think about John O'Keefe's family, it's just disgusting. I feel terrible for them.
Is that was happening, that they had any intention to come.
Let me ask you a little bit about sort of going back to the Waterfall just for a brief moment. Over the course of your time there, how would you describe sort of the tone, or how was everybody at the Waterfall?
It was fine. It was a nice night. It was nothing out of the usual. Just had a good time.
So nothing abnormal, no arguments, no fighting or anything like that?
No.
Same question as it relates to back at your house now at 34 Fairview Road. How would you describe sort of the atmosphere back there?
Same thing. We were just hanging out, sitting around the house talking, having a good time, nothing crazy.
Just a normal night, except for the dead body, you know. Fucking hell.
Now,
You know, another thing I want to say real quick, and we're going to get into more of this when we go to Brian Albert. Here's the thing. I think that there's so many red flags with this entire fucking thing that it's easy to forget that there's another really big red flag, in the sense that the homeowners. Okay. We talked about this with, we actually talked about this in reference to Kara Reed and a potential, actually, I don't know that I talked about it on a live stream. I might've just talked about it on the phone with somebody, but, you know, in regards to her potentially, if it was said at all, saying, I hit him, or whatever, which we know there's a lot of points of contention about that whole thing. But also somebody else the other night had suggested in the chat here, what if she said, did I hurt him? Which was a great suggestion, right? Because of the fact that she was doing CPR, she could have broken his ribs or whatever, or hurt his ribs. So there's that. But also, additionally, I was thinking with somebody else about this. I think, again, it was over the phone, like that. If you really didn't if you really didn't intentionally murder somebody, right? For example, like you can think about like 911 calls are a great example. Whenever you've got these people who are found guilty later, you know, and you hear their 911 calls, well, let's take Alex Murdaugh, right? The first thing they try to do is distance themselves from the entire thing. They didn't have anything to do with it. You know, just distance. And then whenever you have people who actually didn't have anything to do with it, what you typically hear, whether it's on the witness stand or on a 911 call, is people blaming themselves when it wasn't their fault. Perfect example, Maggie Murdaugh's sister, Marion Proctor. When she took the stand and testified about her, you know, last interactions with her sister, she felt terribly guilty and was getting emotional because she's like, I didn't tell her not to go. Just an example. There's countless examples. That's just, you know, right off the top of my head of like how people who didn't actually do it, they tend to play everything back in their mind. It's a guilt that they have to end up dealing with, where it's like survivor's guilt, right? It's like a guilt they place on themselves, even if they didn't do anything wrong. And feeling like, what if I could have done something? Stuff. So in my mind, even if they didn't have a commonality of being like law enforcement or knowing each other through the Boston Police Department, these homeowners and anyone who was there, I thought the same thing about the witnesses today with Brian's friends. I thought the same thing. I'm like, it's odd to me that they aren't showing any sign of like the fact that however this happened, it happened and they were there. and that he died in the cold. And he probably, I mean, I believe, I can't remember. I think we heard testimony from somebody, maybe, or maybe I just was reading about hypothermia. It seems like there was a possibility that he could have actually survived had he been found sooner, because the hypothermia was a factor. But again, it's hard to say because we don't have any fucking evidence of medical things. But, you know, we know he was at least alive, right? He was alive when we know that when he was brought to the hospital. So he wasn't dead yet. So it's a red flag that nobody is, again, they're all trying to act like they didn't have anything to do with it. And it's just the normal thing would be to feel some sort of guilt, even it's like displaced, right? It's the normal thing that we see with survivors, let alone if it's on your property. And then add to that, it's a fellow law enforcement officer. Just the attitude. There's no sadness for his family. I mean, there's not even, it's just like, yep, it was a normal night. I don't know anything. I didn't see anything. I mean, it's bizarre to me. It's really bizarre. Yeah, so Neeson Z says, I also think about John's family. Are they still thinking that Karen is guilty? Great questions. Great questions. I think about this every day. I think the same thing. I remember thinking that when court started today and it showed them in the gallery, to me, they looked different. Like, just it only just went by them for a second or whatever, but like, I felt so bad for them. I mean, just to me, it just seemed like they looked really, I mean, obviously they've every reason to be sad and depressed, but they looked almost like, I don't know the right word for it. If you guys saw it and have a description, feel free to let me know, but it just seemed like they were, I don't know what the right word is. Just it almost seemed like potentially maybe there could be some sort of doubt setting in on their part of like, what if the prosecution is fucking us over? What if they have this wrong? What if Kieran Reed didn't do it? Then how did he die? Right? Just some questions of doubt. Like, what really happened to him? Like, think about that. Like, if the prosecution has it wrong and it wasn't Kieran Reed, then and these folks are involved, or anybody, right, for that matter, and you're John's family, you don't know how he died still. It's so awful. I mean, there's just a lot of tragedy happening here. Whether, just from the very get-go with the investigation being just, I mean, the solo cups and the paper bags and no one being questioned. I mean, it's already a tragedy. Never mind maybe having the wrong person charged with a crime, and then maybe, lying to the family, really. I mean, it's like, if it's like, they know this is a bullshit case and like, but they're trying to just make it seem like it's okay for the family. And like, this is we're actually trying. I mean, and the other thing is, when you think about it, their motivation could be to not get sued. Because if John O'Keefe's family doesn't believe that the prosecution actually put any effort into this case and that there wasn't a good investigation and that like they weren't ever trying in the first place or whatever, like they could sue the state. And maybe that's what it comes down to. Maybe they're trying to have like enough of a appearance for the family to believe that like they did their job, which, I mean, it's hard to believe that, right? But if they can convince the family that they did their job, then all hell won't rain down upon the state from the family. And rightfully so. It should. I mean, that's the thing. And that comes down to dollars, right? Like, they could have they would have, yeah, the state might be trying to avoid that. Maybe it's all about a lawsuit, potential lawsuit. Yeah.
After your daughter, Caitlin, gets picked up and she leaves, what, if any, how long did you stay up after that?
I think once she left, I just did my final cleanup of the kitchen and, shut the lights, and I went upstairs to bed.
And do you recall anything about walking the front door or any of the doors to your house before you went up to bed?
No.
Is that something that you would always do, or do?
It was type of
Okay, another thing I don't buy. I do not buy that they don't ever lock the doors. I'm sorry. It's a big house. They're a well-known family. It's law enforcement, right? I mean, think about law enforcement. If you're a lead, whatever detective, like of the Boston Police Department, do you not think that, like, the thought that this person wouldn't, okay, first of all, if you're law enforcement, you probably are very hyper vigilant, or at least regularly locking your doors, right? One would think. But then if you add to the fact that you're higher up, you're in charge of, what is it, capturing fugitives or whatever, there's always a possibility that you have a target on your back. Like, that's probably, I would imagine that's something that's instilled in law enforcement so that to keep them hyper aware, right? Like that, just whether it's people stealing things or whatever, it just doesn't make any sense that you live in this area and have this type of house and have this type of family with this notoriety with a, like, law enforcement there, and then you just don't lock your doors. I'm sorry, I just don't believe it. Unless you're just relying on your guard dog. That would be the only thing that could make sense.
thing. We have 5 kids. Everyone's coming in and out at different times. Like the last person in, we're supposed to lock it. But then, we changed the doorknobs and
I just don't
immediately
find
the keys got
and-
lost. It was just always a disaster.
also think
So a
they
lot of times the door was just kind of
probably have a
left
ring camera,
unlocked.
and we're not getting that either yet, right? I bet they
And
have.
when you went up
They
to
must
bed,
have some sort of camera too.
share a bedroom.
I mean,
with
again,
your
this is just
husband,
would be
Brian,
normal for people
and
like
was he
this.
awake or asleep when you
He was awake. He was just lying in bed watching TV.
Doorbell camera, whatever.
Now, as far as over the course of that evening after you come up to bed with your husband, do you recall anything about him talking to anyone on the phone or any phone
Oh
conversations?
boy.
I do not.
At some point you fall asleep and then you wake up the next day, is that right?
Yes.
And turning your attention to later on that morning of the 29th. So you had gone to bed about what time?
Probably 2:30ish, somewhere around there.
And it's a little unclear for my question, but when you go up to your bedroom, about what time is that?
About 2-ish.
And so the 2:30 that you're talking about, is that sort of when you fall asleep?
Yeah, sometime around there.
And
I mean, I just have to say that, just using common sense, people can't tell you when they fall asleep, right? I mean, like, technically speaking, they can't because they're asleep. It's just, there's no way for someone to really know that unless they have like one of those watches on that like knows when you fall asleep, like a fancy watch. Like, other than that, I mean, you can't testify to it because you don't know it for a fact, right? You shouldn't be anyway.
from that next morning, how is it that you wake up the next morning?
Well, at some point between 6 and 6:30 that morning, my sister Jennifer came bursting into my bedroom.
Bursting.
And comes bursting into your bedroom, is that correct?
Yes.
And what, if any, how would you describe your sister Jennifer, and how was she sort of acting at that point?
Well, she came in, my husband and I just kind of sat up in bed, and she's saying, he's out in the snow. We found him out in the snow. We don't know if he's okay. And my immediate thought was just that something had happened to one of my children. Something had happened to one of her children. I couldn't imagine why she was in my bedroom at this time in the morning. And I'm like, Jennifer, what are you talking
The thing
about?
with the doors,
And she's
I
like,
think the point of that, they have to try to make a reason or an excuse as to why Jen McCabe was able to just come into the house. So again, I don't think that the doors thing is accurate. So my guess is that Jen has a key or something, or there's something else that we don't have enough information to even speculate on yet, basically. But we all know it's odd that she just comes bursting on in, like she just comes into the house bursting in, right? So like that would be why they are saying all this about the doors not being locked. But again, that's not plausible. And then the other thing is, well, then what is it trying to cover up or hide or whatever? The fact, do they not want people to know she had a key? Is that why? So, I mean, maybe we'll find out, hopefully.
All right, next question.
Karen, if I may? Can we pro-
Okay.
All right, they're approaching. I think I'm going to go ahead and call it there for right now because this was the impromptu version of the plan for tonight. But what we'll do is tomorrow we will finish the rest of this testimony from this day. And like I said too, I'm also let me stop sharing my screen. Hold on just a second. Okay, here we go. And also, yeah, I'm also already working on the testimony for this week on a video. And again, I might even potentially be going live tomorrow during the trial if something crazy starts happening and I'm available. So keep an eye out for that as well. But yeah, I think there was a lot of good discussion because we don't have any help from the prosecution, but I think we've done a pretty good job of trying to put together a timeline based on what people are saying. And, you know, this whole, especially this 12-14 time frame seems to be really crucial. So, wow, what a wild trial. I mean, it just gets wilder and wilder. It just doesn't cease, does it? So it just more and more every day. So thanks everybody for being here and for contributing and helping remember all these details and with different ideas and all of that. And I will see y'all tomorrow, and I will go ahead and roll that outro. See y'all next time.